Hello and welcome to episode 83 of the GameBrew podcast. Today's podcast is not going to be our run-of-the-mill podcast. It'll still be in two halves, and in the first half, we're going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, and then in the second half, we'll be drinking some beers by Black Owned Breweries and spotlighting some games by Black developers. But first, I want to talk through why we're doing this. We have a platform, and because we have a platform, we feel like we have a responsibility to dive in on this topic. Okay, all of us on the podcast, we're all white. This is a time for us as white people to be listening, but also to be acting as allies and not waiting for that directive or that reasoning to come from our Black friends and our friends of color. So we didn't think that it would be responsible for us to be silent, and so that's why we're talking about this now. We want to be supportive, and it made sense for us to do this episode. So we are also going to post some helpful links gathered by experts on the topic we found, including a wonderful resource on how to be an ally, which is updated all the time, and that's great because sometimes you just wake up and don't know what you can do to help. So make sure to check out those resources in the show notes. So here we go. Today it's me, Ian, Dan is here, Alex is here, Chris is here, and Allison is here. So let's start with our feelings and thoughts. And we aren't experts, right? But one important thing to say is that we do believe that Black Lives Matter. And we also know that we need to work to be more anti-racist on the podcast. And that's going to be a project that we continue to work on. So with all that in mind, who wants to share their thoughts and feelings?
I mean, I'll start if we want. It's hard for me because I'm a very empathetic person, and I know a lot of people that this is really affecting. So it's been a lot for me to kind of digest and see how I can help because it doesn't directly affect me. And I kind of feel bad because I'm so emotionally drained from this whole experience, and it's not something I feel like I even have the right to be emotionally drained from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the tough thing is that now here we are during these protests and thinking like, okay, but 3 weeks ago, what was I doing about this? And knowing that I've been a person and had a platform, and it took a movement for me to get on board, you know? So just kind of swallowing that and realizing that, like, that applies to the future, too. Like, it's not going to be 2 weeks and this is done. It's not going to be 4 weeks and it's done. It's like, okay, we need to, like, put in the work and figure out actually how to make this right.
Yeah, for me, it's been really humbling. As Allison, you said, you feel exhausted just after 3 weeks and you don't feel like you have the right. And I kind of feel the same way just because we're getting a crash course in something that people have been dealing their whole lives with. And to Ian's point, it's up to us as people with the privileges that we've had to be allies.
I did not realize how bad the systematic issues are. That's one thing I didn't see until now. And I grew up in a really small town, and there's so much power in numbers. And for the first time ever, I feel like these people who think like me are outweighing people who don't think like me. And it's really nice growing up in a small town to see that, as shitty as this whole situation is, obviously. Like, I feel like we have the momentum for change, and so many things have been changing, and I just hope it continues.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that cross your fingers, knock on wood, something actually useful comes out of this, right? And just to point out that, like, the only reason that could happen is because, like, we demand that it happen. And specifically, I'm talking about not just Black people and people of color. Like, it takes everyone deciding that it needs to change for it to change. And that's, like, another reason to bring it back to, like, this is another reason to do the podcast like this, is that if you out there in listening land have been on the fence about this or don't know, what, like, are uncomfortable talking about or saying Black Lives Matter, like, the reason is because they've experienced systematic racial prejudice for generations, and we all kind of sat on our hands and were like, yep. And there wasn't a movement to fight against it. And that's not to say that anybody gets absolved, right? Like, none of us are free from having to accept that, like, we benefited from our positions of privilege. And B, we all have to make sure that we're turning that now into something useful, into something that's going to make meaningful change in people's lives.
For me, I've never been a very vocal person, and I should be, especially on this issue, because no matter what your political beliefs, this is a human rights issue. This is people's lives, and I'm trying to re-educate myself as much as I can. Just trying to take a step back and re-examine how I've looked at the world for the past 32 years. And it's not the full truth that I've been taught and haven't been exposed to. And it's not good enough to just be not racist. Right now, we all have to be anti-racist. And so that means being active. That means finding ways to contribute. That means making your voice heard, whether that is going to a protest or contacting your politicians or donating or signing your names to petitions. This is something that we have to do now, and we have to continue to do, because it's not just going to go away these aren't issues that are going to go away in 2 weeks. This is going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of reframing of how we think and act for change to actually come about.
And that's kind of what Ian was saying earlier, is that it just can't be a hashtag for a week and then we move on. Like, it has to be a movement, and it has to continue moving. We're a beer and video game podcast, so supporting your local Black-owned breweries, any local Black-owned businesses and restaurants, and, donate, because if you have the ability to donate to whoever you can.
We'll put some links of good stuff you can donate to, yeah.
So if you're looking for something to do to help, there are ways. And also listen, And
one thing I want to say is listen, but also do your research, and don't bombard your friends that are people of color during this time and say, what can I do? What can I do? Do your own research, because this is a really tough time, especially for the Black community. And it's good to be listening, but don't think that it's every Black person's job to tell you what to do. It's your job to figure out what to do to help them, and doing your own research, because it's unfair to them to say that it's their job to teach you.
No, for sure. And what Chris said is really true. And even if your friend is really vocal about this and is posting a lot, it doesn't mean you get to just inundate them with all the questions you have. And doing research is important, like Chris said. But if you're really lost, I'm no expert, but you're welcome to send me a message on Discord, and I would be happy to kind of point you in some directions of how you can support.
Something I didn't think about, but if you're a reader and you want to go check some stuff out, there are a couple things I would recommend. The New Jim Crow is something that everybody should get their hands on and read. And also Between the World and Me is another book that's going to be great to get you at least a little bit of context on this. So those are a couple things. There's plenty of other great books out there, but I just wanted to throw those out in case anybody wants to do some reading.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of Allison and Ian a little bit, some of the ways that you can support are, if you can't make it to a protest, especially because of COVID, there's a lot that you can do just from your own home. You can reach out to your local politicians, your state and national politicians. There's lots of templates for letters, templates for phone calls that you can make to them, which can be found online or in the Ally Resources Guide. But the other thing that I'm trying to do right now is really support Black businesses. And I think that's something that we as in the GameBrew community can do. Why not support Black people in those industries? One of the main reasons to support Black-owned businesses, and this is an article on Mashable, how to find and support Black-owned businesses and why it's important. By diverting your purchasing power to more Black-owned businesses, you're not only helping to strengthen local Black economies, it can also contribute to shrinking the racial wealth gap, foster more job creation for Black people, and help to hold larger companies accountable in regard to diverse representation. I think that sums it up pretty well. There's definitely a lot more than that, but yeah.
Yeah. Allison, I loved what you shared the other day, where it was like the movement has all kinds of supporters, and then it was like classes, and there was
The
like
D&D classes.
the D&D classes of the Black Lives Matter movement. And what that says is like there are ways to make a difference. Go find what your way is. I think the thing that slowed me down was that I was like, well, I want to say, or I want to do the perfect thing. And then the perfect thing was impossible, and so I wasn't doing anything. And I had to like check myself and be like, nope, you don't understand this experience. You are learning what you can as fast as you can, but better to do something than nothing. Yeah. Does anybody have any closing thoughts that they want to share then? Maybe is the best way to do this. Anything that you want to say at the end? I mean, if there is a closing thought that I can make happen in it, like all I would say is do something. And if that something is just listening and educating yourself, that's super important, and everyone should do that. And if you feel like you can write a letter, write a letter. And if you feel like you can donate. And if you feel like you can go to a protest, go to a protest. Like, I just want everyone to feel responsible for it.
Yeah,
I agree.
And be aware that you're going to mess up, and own that and learn from it. And
if the conversation's uncomfortable, you're doing it right.
Correct. And just keep, fighting for the end goal. And
Black Lives Matter.
Hello and welcome back to the second half of the GameBrew Podcast, episode 83. We're going to feature some beers from Black Owned Breweries. So here we go with that.
You forgot our catchphrase, but that's okay.
So Chris,
hey Chris, what are
you
drinking
this week?
But first,
it's time for a beer. So I've been drinking a couple beers from Union Craft Brewery. It's a local Baltimore brew. They're one of the big Baltimore brewing companies. It's co-founded by a couple guys. The main brewer is Kevin Blodger, who's a black brewer, and he always has a lot of unique flavors in his beer. I don't know if you guys are into sours a lot, but his Old Pro is one of like the most distinct sours on the market. I know a lot of people really like it.
You're not really into sours, are you, Chris?
I'm not.
What makes it distinct is what I'm curious about.
So the flavor that makes Hershey's chocolate distinct? Mm-hmm. It has that same flavor.
Interesting. And a sour.
Yeah, so it's I can't remember exactly what the chemical is called, but it has the similar flavor as that in Old Pro. But I'm drinking right now Black Wing Lager. It's a dark lager, kind of like a porter, I guess. Really good. And then I've also been drinking some Divination, which is a very good hoppy ale. So they make very good beers. I've always been a huge fan of Union.
Nice. That's awesome. Dan, what have you been drinking?
I'm drinking Brooklyn Lager from the Brooklyn Brewing Company.
In Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was listening to some YouTube videos and like some things that their brewmaster Garrett Oliver was doing, and he's been their brewmaster for like 30 years almost. And it was kind of interesting just because he talks about how beer's local, and it's hard to like, unless you're like these giant companies, it's impossible to like reach the masses with these cool things that you create. He started brewing in 1984. He went to Boston University, and I think he graduated with like a management degree for music.
Interesting.
And then he went and did some stage managing at University of London. And then he came back to America after drinking a bunch of beer because, in his own words, at the time that he was in college, beer was yellow and fizzy.
That's true.
And that was about it. And after being in Europe, where it was like, oh, beers have aromas and tastes like hay, and it tastes like hops, and it tastes like malt. And it's like, why don't we do this? So then he started brewing craft brews. And then that's whenever in the 80s, whenever this kind of explosion of craft brewing started to happen, is whenever Brooklyn Brewery started to do a whole lot of good stuff. So I'm just drinking the Brooklyn Lager because that's the one that's closest to me.
What's funny is that they've expanded their reach so far. I recall when I was over in Europe last year, I believe in Belgium, I saw them on the tap.
That's the thing, too, is that he said it went from us stealing beer ideas from Europe to Europe now thinking that we're really cool for all of the beers that we do. And I think, and he said it a few times, he said it's like he's a brewmaster, and that's like the third coolest thing you could be, you know?
I feel like American breweries push the edge, whereas a lot of more European breweries kind of are traditionalist. So like it's kind of bouncing back and forth, and that's really cool.
Right. Yeah.
Nice. Allison, you managed to pick up some not beer, that is.
Yeah. I grabbed Flow Wine, FLO. It's a wine by Marcus Johnson, who's an American jazz musician and producer. So he created it in 2011 in Washington, D.C., because he wanted to create an experience for the love of life and music. And he has this like whole big umbrella marketing thing about how you should do things for the love of life. So that's what it stands for, FLO, for the love of. So he has that, and then he has...
But also flow, right?
But also flow. So, yeah, he has that, and then he has a music label that's also under the For the Love Of brand. And I got the Moscato, which... Moscato is probably my favorite wine to grab and drink, just normally. So I thought I'd try this one. It's really floral and citrusy, like honeysuckle-like. That's definitely what hits me more than anything.
I used to do that all the time. I used to go get honeysuckles and
Honeysuckle.
I loved honeysuckles.
Honeysuckle.
Yeah, it's like my childhood and adulthood together. How nice,
that's
right?
beautiful.
Yeah. So it's really
Shout
good.
out to my boy Billy for
Very sweet, obviously. Okay.
Alex, what do you got?
So I picked up a beer from a company in DC called Sankofa Beer Company. They've been around since 2017. Two guys that just started brewing 5-gallon batches in the back of their apartment and really love doing it. And I watched their About Me video, and they were like, yeah, we had our mission statement even before we like started brewing beer.
I love that.
Before they knew that they were going to like have a company, which is pretty awesome. And so the name of this beer is Hibiscus, and it's a hibiscus pale ale.
I love that name.
Is it refreshing and delicious?
So I thought it was going to be more light and florally, but it ended up being a little richer and malty. But it's really, really good. It's a really unique flavor. It's described as a subtle malt notes and select hops are combined with a tropical flowery aroma. And they're still a fairly new company, and they are trying to get their own brewery. They brewed this beer out of Black Flag Brewing in Columbia. And I think that they've also done some stuff in Atlas Brewery in DC as well.
nice.
Yeah, definitely a brewery to keep an eye out for, because this is very tasty.
It's awesome. Who else is drinking beers? Ian?
I'm drinking beers, but I wasn't able to find a beer, unfortunately, that fit the topic of the day. So instead, what I want to talk about is this campaign that is going on in the beer world. So Weathered Souls Brewing Company, which is from Texas, is doing this beer brewing campaign called Black is Beautiful. And what it is breweries can sign up to brew the specific beer, and then all the proceeds from this beer when it's bought will go to support local foundations that support like police reform and legal defense for people who have been wronged, and also to donate to their own local organizations that support equity and inclusion. And a bunch of breweries have already signed on, you can sign up and make the beer and then sell the beer and then donate the proceeds, which is a really
That's awesome.
cool way to help. So if you're listening to this and you are a beer brewer, just go to blackisbeautiful.beer and you can find the details there. Super cool.
Beer.
.beer. I know.
That's amazing.
.beer.
Why are we not the GameBrew.beer?
We need to be the
How do we
don't
get
know.
that?
Oh my gosh.
Clearly someone got there first. Okay, yeah, so that's it for beer. So let's talk about what we've been playing this week. Let's go. Who do I want to hear from first? There's so much good stuff. Chris, can we go to you first?
So, let me weave a story here. The game that I chose was Aryan Legacy of the Coriodan. It's a game by a developer in Cameroon, and it uses all hand-painted, hand-drawn backgrounds and
Not just the backgrounds either. Everything.
everything.
Yeah.
That being said, I fucked up, and I'm on vacation and did not bring my controller, so I was not able to actually play the rest of it. I only played a little bit of it. But from what I played, this game is a beautiful game, and you could tell that there was a ton of time taken to craft everything in this game, from the backgrounds to the animations of the characters. I didn't get deep enough to kind of really experience all the the different gameplay elements of the game. But I mean, it's a beautiful game. And so because of that, I asked Dan and Allison to help me out with this. So I'll let them kind of go deeper into the gameplay and all that.
I know Dan got farther than me, which is funny because I got stuck. So I'll go first. I got stuck. And I think it was a me problem. So the story I got so far is great. Like, I feel like this is an immersive world.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm really in a place. I think that's hard to do in a game quickly.
Right. But it's interesting because it is a long game. You can't play this in like 2 hours and be done. I think Kiro Games says it's like about 15 hours. And once you keep playing it, it makes a lot of sense.
Right, but you feel really good about it in the beginning. Like, it doesn't take a ton to believe the world, which is also hard to do. Right. And I think they do that well.
Yeah.
Isn't it a super fleshed out story? Because I know that they have a comic as well.
Oh yeah,
and
they
so
do?
I feel
That's
like
awesome.
if you're able to create an entire comic series based on your video game world, that your story is probably pretty fleshed out.
On the note of the comic piece, I read like the first 20 some pages, and it was pretty much almost exactly what I was doing in the game, which I thought was very cool. So they're keeping the core of the story the same, and I'm interested to see. I'm going to read everything they have out for the comics so far. I'm interested to see if the plot is different or if it's the same but gives you more depth with the comic. You know what I mean?
Okay, so they made a comic basically of the story, or it's so far at least.
So far, at least, of what I've read.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it is almost frame for frame, but just like more visual with the comic.
Yeah, I believe it is the story, just with the main plot points and everything visually animated for it. But the thing I like about it is the legacy of the Koryo-Dan is that in order to harness the energy to overpower your Orion, you or the Orionics as they are in the game, you have to be flawed.
Ooh.
Like, it's not like you can't do it if you are a well-rounded person. It's like you have to feel that there is something missing within you in order to overpower this power beyond the capability that it is.
Overpower it beyond like the normal cap out.
Yes.
That's a cool mechanic. I like that a lot.
I think my favorite part about this game is that I don't think I've ever played a game in this sort of environment or with these type of cultural influences. That kind of speaks to how much, I guess, Western culture and Western gaming culture specifically has influenced the games we play and the games that are made. Most of the games we play are influenced either by more Asian culture or games that are more European, like Knights and Dragons and stuff. It's kind of rare, in my opinion, that we have an environment like this.
Well, actually, it's interesting that you say that because Olivier from Kiru Games did send us a little audio clip where he talks a little bit about that too.
Yeah, let's hear that clip.
Hello, GameBrew community. Thanks for the invitation. I am Madiba Olivier, the founder of Kiro Games, and I'm here to talk about Orion Legacy of the Koryo-Dan, the first African fantasy action role-playing game that we have created. While we were making Orion, we have a lot of objectives at the same time. Firstly, we wanted to give back to the gaming community because we have played game all of our lives, and we wanted to bring African fantasy in the creative world for other game designers and players, and so they can see the rich opportunity that they can build world around it. And secondly, there is this high technical challenge because we wanted to prove that we can live off our passion. So we decided to make a big indie games on the first hit, like 15 hours playtime, real-time combat system, hand-drawn graphics, etc. So we were in crunch, in fact, from day one. And the last but not least objective was the philosophical part, because when we turned pro as game designer, we decided that, okay, we will not just provide games with black character in African world. We have to go deeper than that. When you play one of our games, like Orion, in fact, you have to feel that you grew up with the characters, not on a superficial ways with random problem that you will never have, but with question we think everyone have at a certain level of life, like who am I? What am I doing here? What is this mess calling life? What is the purpose of all that? this is something very central in the Orionic universe, and it was a quest for us. I think we got our answers on these questions while making the game, in fact. And it took us like 13 years to go from the amateur project we had at universities to the pro game you will play. Making a video game is hard for everyone. I think every studio have to fight to have the right to build games. But when you are Black and African, you have a lot of bonus stage on the way. Let's start with the funding. When you are regular game developers, you have to prove that you can make the game, etc. But as African developers and Black, we have to prove that we are not scammers. It was really humiliating sometimes when we were asking funds that we had this, oh, you are a Nigerian online scam, etc. And we are Cameroonian, by the way, not Nigerian. So we overcome it by doing our own fundraising process. We literally build a self-crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding platform to be funded while at the same time coding the game. So you can imagine the stress, like you are coding the game and you are like 2 months of financial visibility to convince others, people that you can finish this game, and you have to ship quickly a demo, etc., etc. Now it's easier because people trust us more. We also had the problem of the human resources because there is no school of game development there in Cameroon. So we have to train ourselves, the team, from regular comic drawers or general programming to game artists and game coders. Yeah, you have also this extra bonus stage about, for example, the power outrage. Like you are coding and you have to suffer 4 hours without electricity. And we decided to turn this time in brainstorming mode because since we didn't have enough time for the rest of everything, when there were not electricity, we started meetings about the scenario, the game structure, etc. Yeah, it was kind of hard. So as a Black developer, there are some things that we expect from the gaming community to make things better. First, I will say that no one wants the gamers to support a Black game just because it has been done by Black developers, because it's not fair from their money. We respect the fact that they work for their money and they deserve good quality games made by Black or white. It's not the question. But we ask them more to break what we call the exotic wall. You know, when someone is on the Steam store and he see the Orion game, for 2 seconds in his mind, he have these bad pictures about Black people suffering in Africa, suffering in the hood in United States, etc. And challenge yourself to at least analyze the game like you analyze anyone else, any other games. So break this exotic wall from the gamers community, and maybe for the publishers and press, also to give more chance to Black developers, also by breaking this lack of trust often. You know, we often have to apologize to be smart at a certain level, because if you are a genius, a white genius, and you explain something, the guy who must fund you is like, okay, he's a genius, I have to understand what he's trying to say. But when you are maybe a Black genius, you have always to apologize on the fact that, okay, you don't understand, but I'm not lying. I'm not trying to steal your thing. It's just that what I'm saying is maybe complex. So this is a little bit the change we hope to see in the gaming community. And I think this last 3 years, there is a lot of good evolution. I think majors are doing a lot of jobs on diversity in the game, heroes, etc. So we keep that way. I think gamers are the best on the world. About everything happening right now in the United States, all the thoughts of the Kiro team are with the families of the victims, of this injustice and all the victims of injustice around the world, by the way, because everywhere in the world there are always these groups of bad people using violence and torturing the innocent ones. And I think when good people have talked enough, anger is the right answer facing injustice. But the challenge is to keep this anger with dignity. You know, we think that in every media we love, every movies, every games like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Naruto, etc., and Orion if you play it, there is this message that we will face in our life the greater evil, but we will always have to keep the light in face of this darkness. We'll always have to be angry, to fight with everything we got, but without breaking the dreams of others. It's about winning against the seeds of the world, but without becoming a seed. You see this thing that we love in the Star Wars universe since 20 years. It's the time now for all the gaming community and the geek community maybe to rise the occasion to inspire others in this fight. It's like, this is how I see it personally. It's a challenge for us, like Ryu when he tried to master the perfect Hadouken without hatred. So that's what I will say. We have to be better than what we fight. We have to not be calm, not be shy. We have to be angry, but please don't break dreams of others on the way. That's my main message to all those who are fighting for a better world in United States right now and all around the world. So thanks a lot, everyone of the community, for the time. For those who want to break this exotic wall and discover Orion and maybe get some inspiration in this tough time, you can discover Orion on Steam, on PC, Orion Legacy of the Coriodan. And you can also discover the comic version in color on Amazon and Kindle for those who don't play on Steam and who all want to discover African fantasy. We even have done a free black and white version on website like Manga Draft if you want to see quickly what we talk about. And we hope to get your feedbacks on our Twitter account or Facebook. Just follow Kiro Games and tell us what you think about our jobs. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much to Olivier for taking the time to make that recording for us and send that to us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and it was really good to hear him talk about his own game and talk about what it's like to make a game from, his experience. That is amazing. Yeah. Chris, you were playing something else as well, right?
I did. So because of my technical difficulties, I was playing a game called Treachery in Beatdown City, also very, very recently released. I believe it was made by one person. That could be a GameBrew fact or an opinion. I'm not sure. It's a really cool game, and basically it's a combination of an RPG mixed with a beat 'em up with very old school graphics. And so you'll go through a map, kind of Mario style. When you go to fight a new character, you'll be put into like an arena and do different moves based off of how many skill points and skill bars you have, essentially. So it kind of has a pretty interesting fighting mechanic to it. It gets a little repetitive, but I think the most striking thing about the game is kind of the conversations in between all these fights, because it's very racially charged, I guess. Yeah. Basically, one of the guys that you play as, you have 3 different people you play as, and you can switch in between them at a certain point in the game. And one of the guys is like an owner of a community center. And one of the people you fight is basically like, hey, you're that guy that just hands out free food and likes to help the community or whatever. He was like, well, yeah, that's what a community center is. And it's kind of like trying to teach you that in a way. And then you go and fight and then go beat this person up. It's a very interesting way that a message is conveyed in this game. And it kind of works because it's the writing of it's a little cheesy.
Yeah.
But because also the style of the art is a little cheesy nowadays, just because it's like 8/16-bit
I love
Super
that art,
Nintendo
though.
style,
Yeah.
it kind of works. I've been enjoying it. The combat's not super deep, and like the RPG elements aren't super deep, but like it's a pretty good game. Like I'm gonna keep playing it.
It looks cool. It's fun that they are taking, something that you would expect to be sort of like a beat 'em up type thing and turning it into an RPG. Like, I like that flaunting of expectations. So I think that's cool.
The only thing I wish there was more of was stats and skill trees.
You're such a stats
Loves
guy.
a good skill tree.
Of course he does. Chris loves a skill tree.
I'm going to talk about a game called Sweetheart now. It's spelled with an X in the middle, so Sweet X Heart is how it's spelled, but it's pronounced Sweetheart. This is a game that I played. It's like a slice of life visual novel, and you play as a 19-year-old girl from the Bronx who attends art college and interns at a tech company. So it's basically like a short little visual novel, and it puts you in the shoes of this person. And basically, you wake up, you go either to school or to work, and then maybe you go hang out with your friends afterwards. And there are a few narrative choices where like different things happen. A lot of it is about microaggressions and experiencing microaggressions from like your friends and your boss and from just like random dudes on the street. And so it's very much a game, I think, that's aimed at giving people perspective that they might not have, which is really cool that someone opened that door. It's got really great art. Like, I think the art is like playful enough that it feels safe, but also like sort of real enough that you kind of get that it's also real world. And it's fast. Like, you can do an entire playthrough of this game in like 15 minutes. And so I did 2 playthroughs and got 2 slightly different endings. And I think there's a lot going on in the title. Sweetheart, with a space in between, is sort of like talking about her specific heart maybe, but like sweetheart is also a term, like a pejorative term a lot of the times that men can use to demean women if they're like talking down to them.
It triggers me.
Yeah. So I think it's cool that the developer is thinking about sort of maybe the developer is thinking about how to reclaim that phrase. But I had a really good time with it. Would recommend that people play it. It's a great game, safe for all ages, and great to sort of get a little slice of life there.
And the creator, Kat Small, she has a really cool book out I actually ordered.
Oh.
Called How to Become a Public Speaker in a Year. She has a blog too, and the blog was really awesome, and I loved reading it. So that drove me to actually buy this book. So that's out there as an ebook, and you could just buy the actual physical book on Amazon, which I did, and I'm waiting on it. I'm pretty excited about it because, ironically, public speaking is my biggest problem.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Allison. That's amazing. And
Allison, you're on a podcast.
I know.
Alex, what do you got, man?
So I played a game this week called Chrono Ghost, which is a very difficult game. It's made by a developer, Nighttime Studios, and it was actually at MagFest in 2017, 2018, and 2019. And I'm sad that I missed talking to this guy 2019 when I was there. But it's a skill-based platform game that you're on a timeline. And so every level is 15 minutes long, and you have a couple different skills. Have you guys played Limbo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very similar to Limbo in the sense that you're going to die a lot in this game. The main thing in this game is that you can control time, but you can't control all of time. There's only some aspects that you can control. So like there are these swinging clock handles or gears with teeth on them like saw blades that spin. And if they're green, then you can control them. If they're red, you can't control them. And so you can either speed up time, slow down time, pause time, and then you can dash and jump. And with all of those skills, as you get further and further into the game, it gets more difficult. And the skills that you learned, like at the beginning of a level, you have to like improve on those skills as you go through that level. For me, it's definitely a game that normally a game like this, I would play the first like 10, 15 minutes of and be like, I don't like this because I would get so discouraged.
I remember you sent me a message and you're like, my game's really hard.
I mean, there's a certain amount of focus and there's a lot of patience that you have to kind of be like, all right, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get past this gear. And like, I think in the couple hours that I've played, I'm about 7 of the 12 levels through.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm at 537 deaths that I've had.
Nice.
In normal mode, you have 15 minutes to finish a level and you have 100 lives. So if time runs out, then you have to restart the level. If you lose all 100 lives, then you have to restart the level.
That's brutal.
Oof.
Yeah.
Have you done either of those things?
Yeah, so I've definitely lost a couple levels, but then it's funny, I go back and almost that next run, I finish it in like 6 minutes.
Wow.
And so it's kind of
You
like
learned.
you learn. At first I was like, man, this gamepad is not working correctly. And then I realized like
Are you
there's
still
a
using
little
that
tiny
kind of fake one? The fake.
Yeah. So that's not helping, but that's not why I was messing up. There's this little tiny half circle that after you do a certain task like a dash, it refills your meter. And I didn't see that for like 2 times that I played through this level. And then I finally realized it and I was like, oh, I can't do that again until that meter refills.
Right.
Till the meter gets back.
That fixed my timing. And then that skill was easy for me then.
That's really cool. I'm excited to play that one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, GameBrew. So after we recorded this episode, Allison was actually able to get in contact with Kelly Davis from Nighttime Studios, who developed Chrono Ghost. And he had some awesome insight to share with us about developing the game and about the video game industry and what he sees for the future. So let's take a listen.
Howdy. My name is Kelly Davis, and I am half of Nighttime Studios. Nighttime Studios was founded by myself and my best friend, Jose. And I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you, Allison, for the invitation, and thank you to the GameBrew podcast for allowing me to join you today. So I just want to touch bases on a few topics that we have here, and I'll just get right to it. The reason for creating games, what possessed me or what struck a chord in me to make me want to begin creating video games. And I can honestly say, as a kid, creating games in general started with me creating my own board games. I remember hot summer nights, I would be in the house and I had poster board, my crayons, my color pencils. I would cut out little figurines and I would create my own board games as a kid. So that's how I began creating games in general, non-video games, just games. And what made me want to create video games was just my love for Nintendo and the gaming industry, the Game Informer magazines. My first game was Super Mario 64, and then I transitioned into the Game Boys, every edition, and I've always wanted to create a game. I originally went to college for game design, however, that didn't fall through, so I went to school for computer science. And hey, I was like, you know what? I know how to program and develop and do all this cool stuff in the software realm. Guess it'll be easy to create a video game. I have the technical skills, so why not try it? And the passion and the creativity. So that led me down the path of creating video games. Graduated college, and lo and behold, I started with Unity and opened it up and just let everything flow through. It took some time to learn it. I started in, was it 2014-ish, 2015, and I've been creating since. So that's a little backstory about me and what made me want to create games. And I'd be lying if I did not highlight these other few catalysts behind me wanting to do so. The Ori and the Blind Forest, all the indie games. I watched the indie game movie probably, this is probably not healthy, but I probably watched it over about like 30, 40 times. It's probably not healthy, but I have watched that movie probably about 30 or 40 times. The Fez, the Meat Boys, and Ori and the Blind Forest. Adventures of Pip was another one of my favorites. It's a little bit flies under the radar and it's underrated, but it's a really, really well-designed game. Mechanically, the sound, it takes the book or the page out of the Super Mario worlds. So that's a little bit, that's just the gist of, why I wanted to what made me want to create video games or create games in general. And just to touch on another topic here. So with my content, I honestly want to have the opportunity to show the world and show people of that look like me that it's, hey, this is possible. You don't have to be a such and such or such and such to do certain things. I'm just going to give you some backstory on me. I was a collegiate athlete. I played college basketball. I've played semi-pro basketball. I've played basketball pretty much my entire life, starting from grade school all up into college. And I'm a freaking nerd at the same time. So it's possible. But I want just people to be able to accept and see my creative side as well. I think I bring a different aspect to the gaming industry. As we can see with Chrono Ghost, it's not your typical game. It's sci-fi, it's mixed with a bunch of nature. Every level has its own specific theme. And that speaks volume about me and what I enjoy outside of the gaming world. I'm a massive space and science dude. And if you came to my house, you would see that I have a green thumb. I have plants all over my house. I have a garden, and I enjoy the two. So I just want to bring this new wave to the gaming industry. I don't have to look like a game developer in order to develop, so I want it to just be that. What are some of my influences for game design and gameplay? For Chrono Ghost in general, my major influences for Chrono Ghost were Ori and the Blind Forest, Adventures of Pip, and Celeste. Celeste was towards the tail end of Chrono Ghost. It came out, and I put Chrono Ghost on halt for a little bit so I could actually play the game and enjoy the music, the game design, the mechanics, the fluidity of the character, the atmosphere. Everything about that game just breathes and embodies indie. And coming from the era of the Fez and the Meat Boys to the Celeste, you just see everything encapsulated inside of Celeste. It's indie all the way. It's indie all the way. So those are some of the influences behind Chrono Ghost. Do I have any upcoming projects that I guess people can look forward to? Yes. So as Nighttime Studios, two-man team, hence Nighttime Studios, because we work at night. We have our own day jobs, and outside of that, we come home and do what we love to do. So our upcoming projects for Nighttime Studios, we have one project in the works for Nighttime Studios, and it is, I can just give a little bit about it. It's, if you think of WarioWare, but in a Nighttime Studios way, coming from the Chrono Ghost realm, and our backstories and our personalities, just keep that picture or that imagery in your head when you think of a WarioWare game coming from Nighttime Studios, or something similar to WarioWare coming from Nighttime Studios. We're going to add our own twist and our own spin, and it's going to be something brand new in that regard. Aside from that, myself and my partner, his name is Jose, we do our own development by ourselves for our own creative freedom and to express our own creativity. And I think he's working on something as well. And I know that I'm working on something that revolves around bees and all the types of wasps in the world. And I'm not quite sure I can share what he's working on, but we're both working on like separate projects along with like a team project for Nighttime Studios. Let's see. Is there anything else I would like to share with the gaming community? Yes, I do. So with the gaming community, with what is all going on in the world right now, a lot of people are extremely sensitive to what's going on right now, and everyone's locked in and tuned in to the racial tensions of the United States and of the world in general, and what's going on with police brutality and systemic racism and all the different struggles that are going on right now. So I just want the gaming community to understand that there are people out there, regardless of, you don't have to be a specific color, you don't have to be a specific age or gender to accomplish something, and everyone should be looked at fairly. Everyone should be given a chance. Because I look a certain way, I shouldn't be discredited. I should have the same opportunity that the other person has. And I think people are starting to wake up now and understand that. So let's just see what happens later on down the road in the gaming community. I'm just excited. I'm really excited to be here and showcase what I can do. I've gone to multiple gaming conventions to showcase the game. I've received tons of feedback, but at the same time, I've also received, where's the developer for the game? Can I speak with the developer of the game? And I tell them, you're looking at them, and they say, wait, you created this game? Yes. And I've received that comment over and over again at all these conventions. Like, people just cannot believe or wrap their brains around that someone that looks like me can actually do these things. So let's keep the gaming industry clean, and let's make sure everyone gets the right opportunities, regardless of what's going on in the world. We're making progress, but it should not take what has happened in order to highlight other ethnicities and genders in the gaming community. Every gaming event I've ever been to, I'm going to bring up MagFest, Music and Gaming Festival. Everyone loves you equally, like walking around the Gaylord Hotel. The parties, the raves, the gaming scene, it's just, we're here for gaming. We all enjoy it, so let's just treat it as that. And that's pretty much, that's all I have to say. Once again, I want to thank you, Allison, and thank you to the GameBrew podcast for allowing myself, Kelly Davis, one half of Nighttime Studios, to join you. And hopefully we can do this again. Ciao.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly, for taking the time to send us that. And we definitely look forward to talking to you in the future more. Now, back to the games that we've been playing.
Allison.
So I played a alternate reality game.
Augmented.
I think I looked it up and I think it's alternate.
Game.
I was really sure it was
Are you
augmented,
sure?
but alternate is apparently what we're supposed to say. Yes.
Alternate
ARG.
reality? All
It's
right.
an ARG.
Augmented, yeah.
ARG.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. Everything I looked up said one way and then the other way. So I'm really unconvinced.
It's either
it's
one of those things.
And it was made by Elle O'Siley Wood. I hope I pronounced that right. She's a video game presenter, journalist, has been named GameIndustry.biz as one of the most influential women in gaming. So baller status. And
Nice.
so she does television presenting, live stage event hosts for video game stuff. She's a voice actress. And she actually just made this game, it looks like as a side project, Easter egg hunt kind of thing during the COVID-19 lockdown this year.
And what is the game called?
The game is, that would be important. Why didn't I start there? Sorry, the game's called The Missing Locksmith.
We wanted you to have to find
Yes,
the name
that's
of the
part
game.
of
It
the
was part of the
adventure.
That's part of
And
the
it's definitely
ARG
not linked
experience.
below, so go ahead and find that yourself. So I tried to do this by myself, and it says that you could do it by yourself or with people, but I got really mad.
So that's why she called Detective Dan on the case.
Luckily, Dan was available. I was so glad he was at home, and I just asked him to help me with it because I had been trying to break a code without any context by myself for hours.
Oh my lord.
Until he taught me what
that's
I
when-
needed to do, which I don't want to spoil anything for people.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
It
not
was
going to
so
spoil
much fun
it,
to play
but
with somebody, so that's the big thing I wanted to say
is.
although you could do this one by yourself, I really suggest grabbing a friend and doing it together because that made the experience amazing where I was much more frustrated
so much
before.
fun.
We were able to bounce off of each other with ideas and we were Googling all over the place for weird stuff that's now in our history. So
And nothing makes you feel like more cool than whenever you and somebody else or a few other people are thinking really hard and then all of a sudden you go, oh my God, I figured it out. Like whenever Allison did that a few times, she was like, I got it. I know what it is. And then she would type in something and be like, yes, I got the thing. And then we both
digital
give
high fives
through the internet.
It was a lot of fun. I really suggest sitting down and doing this with friends. It's a great thing to do virtually because you could both search for things and get in a Discord chat like we did and chat it over. Really fun experience. You could do this together in a house easily, but you don't have to. So yeah, big 2 thumbs up. Heavily suggest this. And also just kind of look her up and follow her because she's really, really cool person in the video game industry. Yeah.
Woot and Dan.
So I played a game because Alex brought it to my attention and was like, have you seen this? And I looked at it, and he was like, dude, this is going to make me cry. And I looked at it, and I was like, dude, this is going to make me cry too. Dibs. Because just
I want emotions too.
I want emotions. I'm not a murder robot. But like just watching the trailer, I started to be like, oh, this is an emotional experience. So the game I played is called Before I Forget.
Not to be confused with that song by Slipknot.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's by a company called Threefold Games, which it's two people, Claire Morwood and Chella Ramanan out of the UK. And they came up with this game idea, I think in 2016, I think it was. Yeah, at the Game Jam in Bristol in 2016.
Oh, game
UK,
jams are
not
so
Bristol,
cool.
Virginia or Tennessee. It's a walking simulator, as Ian likes to refer to them as.
And I
it's
love
an
that.
interactive story experience. And it's, oh God, it's just so beautiful. I don't even know, like, go look up the trailer for it because...
Yeah, it's got this sort of like washed out kind of like hyper pastel vibe going on.
And it starts as this
That's
because the
gorgeous
story is I'm going to read directly what their description is. So it's a narrative exploration game. You step into the world of Sunita, a woman living with early onset dementia. The first thing that happens is kind of like you wake up and you're like, where am I? Who am I? And so as you're going around, everything's kind of this washed out sort of yellow color. And then as you like pick up things and remember stuff, there's these big bright splashes of color change as the memories kind of return to you. And so you pick up a lot of, there's like postcards, scribbled notes, photographs, a lot of like items that are just around that trigger memories. And while there's like a lot of beauty, it's also like kind of a mystery because it's exploring what it's kind of like to not know what's going on. There's one part which, oh God, was just like it made me feel so sad and anxious is you're looking for the bathroom and you just can't find it because you keep going through doors. I was so scared at that point just because it's like the way that feels is how people who suffer from dementia like feel like that's sometimes what happens. And they did work with a lot of people in the medical field to try and make sure that everything that was in this game really did do what happens to people. But it also explores a lot of music stuff is in it, which is really cool. The soundtrack by Dave Tucker is great. And there's some really emotive piano stuff that he has that's in there. There's a lot of stuff about astrology, which is in it too. Astronomy. I'm not a science man, so sometimes I forget which one is which.
Astronomy is the stars, and astrology is how the stars impact your.
Okay. So kind of both then.
Okay.
But it's just beautiful, and it just blows my mind that it's like two people kind of created this and spearheaded this in 2016, and it just came out. It actually hasn't come out yet. You can get it on Steam in July, but right now, if you are subscribed to Humble, it's in the June Humble Choice package. So if you subscribe to that, you can get it through there. I do recommend it. It only takes like an hour, so it's like watching a movie or like a long drama, but it's really, it's just so good. I don't even think I'm doing it justice by talking to it. So please go play it.
It's like,
Everyone.
So good. I'm thinking about it now and I'm tearing up a little bit, but it's so good.
This is Allison, just cutting in with a message from the amazing two-girl team, Shella Ramanan and Claire Morwood from Threefold Games. Claire got back to us just so we can share a bit more on them from Before I Forget, some personal history, and what we can expect in the future from them. So here's what we received back. Thanks so much for including us in your podcast. Before I Forget is a short first-person narrative adventure about Sunita, a woman suffering from early onset dementia. In Before I Forget, you play as Sunita. As you wander from room to room, you discover mysterious objects, each holding a fleeting, fragmented memory. Examine faded postcards, scribbled notes, photographs, and more to uncover Sunita's past, piece together her life story, and understand her present. We've been working on the game for 3 years now, and are so excited that it's already out in the world as a Humble original and will be coming to Steam and itch.io for everyone to experience. Shella and Claire, Threefold Games. We asked some questions as well, so I'll get into those now. What was the catalyst that made you want to create games? I've been creating games in some form or another as long as I can remember. When I was a child, I would make board games and storytelling games with my friends and did some very simple coding and game making on the family computer. Later, in my late teens, I would make small games and take part in game jams with my friends. I didn't get into it more seriously until my early 20s, though. I had just finished a degree in paleontology and was working in a shop part-time. I was living in Bristol, where there's a really great independent game scene that I got involved in. I realized that I was passionate about making games. That's what I put all my energy in my spare time alongside my degree. In October 2016, I went to a game jam where I met Shella, and we teamed up and began working on Before I Forget. It had lots of really encouraging responses from people early on, so we were really motivated to continue working on it. What are you hoping to bring to the gaming industry with your content? One of the main things we've always wanted to do is show that you can create game that tackles a subject like dementia without it needing to be an educational game. In other mediums like books or film, there are endless examples of narratives that, like in our case, focus on a character's experience and health issue or other serious matter. But often there's a barrier with video games where there's an assumption that there has to be an educational message behind it. We wanted to show that it's possible and valid to create this kind of narrative within video games and still have it classed as a video game rather than something adjacent to video games. We also wanted to make sure that Sunita as a character had depth to her, in that she isn't defined by her dementia. She had a vibrant life before, that which still has a huge impact on her day-to-day life throughout the game. What are some of your influences for game design gameplay? We were initially really inspired by games like Gone Home, Dear Esther, and What Remains of Edith Finch, which have an amazing sense of mystery and make you want to explore and discover the story. With Gone Home in particular, we studied the game a lot for its level design and ways which it leads you around the house while still giving a sense of choice, and how it locks later parts of the game off in believable way within the narrative. We also took a lot of inspiration from games like Virginia and 30 Flights of Loving for their cinematic style and use of jump cuts and cutscenes. We really liked the way that these games portray time passing and enable the player to piece together the story between scenes. Do you have any upcoming projects that we can look forward to? We're involved in a project that's in its very early stages called Windrush Tales. It's a collaboration between us and another writer and artist, Corey Brotherson and Naima Ramanan, at the moment. It's an illustrated narrative game which tells the stories of a few characters leaving the Caribbean to start a new life in 50s Britain. There are no set plans for the release date or anything like that yet, as we're still looking for funding and working on gameplay and narrative ideas. You can follow the project at Tales Windrush on Twitter. I really want to thank Clara and Shella for taking the time to do this for us. I really adore the message of their game. Normalizing the presence of health issues in characters and making it a part of games instead of its own separate, educational piece is really meaningful to me, and I really look forward to following all of their projects in the future. Now I'll send you back to the episode.
And with that, I think that brings us to the end of the episode.
I also just wanted to say real quick, if anybody out there in GameBrew Land wants to talk about why Black Lives Matter, or you're just not sure how to have that conversation and you need support, you can reach out to us. Again, we're not experts, but that door is open in case you need somebody to talk to. And go ahead and check out all the wonderful links we have at the bottom of the show notes this week. They're super important. And thanks for listening to the show. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.